Coming up on Esoteric Atlanta.
Powerful, independent to question our world power. How dare you question the authority? How dare you? That's what being a heretic means, right? I'm a proud heretic. I'm a proud heretic. The definition of heretic is one who questions the narrative.
Hello, everybody. This is a very long episode today. We're going to be going over one of Sergei Monast's works. We covered Sergei Monast a long time ago on this channel, and we're going to go through all of his works. He put out multiple conspiratorial publications before his suspicious demise in the late 90s. And so I dedicate this today to Sergei Monast. Again, this is a long one. I thought about dividing this up into parts, but it's probably better that we do it all at the same time. We're going to be going through the Toronto Protocols. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments section below before we go through more of Sergei Monast's work. He was famous for making blue beam part of our vocabulary, understanding what that is. And of course, his journalism provided us information that the original blue beam was going to be a hologram Jesus, which if you have been on my channel for a while, you know that that is a concern of mine, that might be what they go back to doing, which is terrifying. So with that being said, please sit back and enjoy this. I would suggest ordering yourself a copy of this, but otherwise, let's get into the show today.
And before we get into the episode today, just a big thank you to all of our patrons and our producers here on Esoteric Atlanta. Without you guys, this channel would not be possible. If you would like to help support the work we do here on Esoteric Atlanta, there is a link to our Patreon account down in the description box below.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Esoteric Atlanta. Of course, my name is Brice. Fingers crossed that we're able to go through this work here on YT. I'm kind of gambling doing this on YT. You'll see in a minute why. If you do like this work and you think that this is informative, please share and like and comment, even if the only comment you can leave is like your country flag or something, because that does help the algorithms, and we know that they mess with the algorithms. So it's not going to stop me. It's not going to stop us from speaking. They really don't want us speaking about certain things, and so they're trying everything they can do to get us to not speak about certain things, but that I'm an Aquarian, so we just get super stubborn and we just go even harder when someone says we can't. And so I am going to be talking about a topic that I have covered before on this channel. This is something I briefly mentioned with Catherine Edwards a couple of weeks ago when we spoke about one world religion, Candace Owens, and hologram Jesus. If you missed that episode, I will tag it down in the description box below so you can go back and rewatch it. No need to watch it before this. You can watch this first. This is not in any particular order. But I had mentioned something about this Canadian journalist named Sergei Monast. Now, I covered Sergei Monast. I think I covered him for our Mystery Mondays like 5 years ago, 4 years ago, something like that. And you guys, I have over 1,000 deep dives on this channel. I research a lot. You guys know I research a lot. So there's some stories that I've covered on this channel that I don't really remember, especially if they were like 4 or 5 years ago. I might vaguely remember covering them. But you do research, you do a show, and if the story isn't super impactful to you, you'll forget the details of the story over time. That's just normal. That just happens. But there are a few stories I've covered that have deeply affected me to the point where I really don't forget a lot of the details of these stories. One was the Giants. When I covered the Giants, that deeply affected me. And then another one was Sergei Monast. And Sergei Monast was again, he was a French Canadian journalist, investigative journalist. And he was kind of responsible for the person who gave us the vocabulary Bluebeam, Operation Bluebeam. And Sergei Monast is no longer with us. He mysteriously left the earth, we'll say, in the 90s, under mysterious circumstances. Do with that what you will. And he basically had done all this research into the establishment and realized that they were up to no good. I mean, duh. But he realized that they were going to be doing something called Bluebeam. And the original prognosis for him was that they were going to put a hologram Jesus in the sky to convince people that the second coming was upon us. Now, before we go in any further into this, I just want to say, because of the platform that we are on, that this is for educational and entertainment purposes only. In all seriousness, though, please do not take anything I say as fact. Please don't take anything anyone says as fact, right? Anything. Always do your own research. Always go that extra mile to make up your own minds, because programming is hardcore. And I personally don't want to be responsible for forcing somebody to believe something that maybe I've gotten wrong by mistake. So I just really encourage you to please take this as entertainment value and do your own research. Well, anyway, with Sergei Monas, he kind of felt like they were going to put a hologram Jesus in the sky through this thing called Bluebeam. It was going to mimic the second coming of Christ, and therefore it would make it super easy for the NWO, this elusive legend of, for entertainment purposes, the New World Order, right, would be walking through the front door, because hologram Jesus was going to be in the sky telling people to do things, and they would surrender, thinking that it literally was the second coming of Christ. Now, as Catherine said in our video prior to this, it's quite clever, right? They've been very clever with this, because we know, I know on this channel, and a lot of people believe this, that the second coming of Christ is not about a person. It's about a Christ consciousness. It's about waking up to the realization of who you really are as a spirit, as a soul, and not as a regular person on this earth. I mean, you are a regular person on this earth, but just kind of breaking down the illusions of the matrix. In the yoga Sanskrit, they call that Maya. That's illusionary stuff. So the illusion starts to break, which I think that is happening to an extent right now on planet Earth. But what they've done, and if you guys have been with me for a while, we went through a lot of the missing books of the Bible. We've really challenged the system, which I believe, in my opinion, the mark of the beast, as they talk about in the Bible, is actually the system. It's the matrix. So it's politics, it's education, it's religion, it's all these things that require a system. Because anytime that you are in a system, you are in a pecking order of elites, are the haves and the have nots, like a monarchy, and then they're peasants, yeah? And if you study the law of one, you know that that is the satanic system. That the system of the light is we're all equal. It's a social memory complex. We're all part of this. We're all equal. We all have different jobs to do, but we're equal in value, if that makes sense. And so anything that relates to the system is part of the beast, in my opinion, which again would be any religion, including Christianity. And so doesn't mean that I think the Christ is bad. Au contraire, I think God and the Christ are incredibly awesome and wonderful, but I think they've been totally inverted for the sake of the system, the beast system. And so, as Catherine was saying, this is clever. They've spent centuries setting it up for us to fall for this hologram Jesus by creating this Bible that we know has been edited over 50 times since the 1700s. God knows how many times it was edited before the 1700s. All the missing books of the Bible that are way more valuable than the canonized Bible, which is been changed and is controlled. They wrote it. The canonized Bible has a copyright on it. The Windsor family owns the Bible, the Holy Bible. You can't copyright something unless you created it. So, I just, yeah, I don't think that's the word of God. I think that's a very controlled script. People, we sit here today and we look at everything happening in the world, and so many people are like, oh, this is Revelation playing out. And yes, it is. Revelation is absolutely playing out right now. However, if we think about this critically, they wrote the script. The establishment wrote the script and they control the special effects. So they can make prophecy come true because they created it themselves in order to mind program people into following and into consenting and submitting to enslavement. And I've said this before, and I know this is going to be triggering to people. If this triggers you, there is nothing quite like love than Christian hate, right? It's if this triggers you, then I would ask, just don't watch. Don't watch. Don't be abusive in the comment section. We love God on this channel. We love the Christ on this channel. We just don't like religion. We don't like the beast system. But I've learned since covering all of this that a lot of what they've also been clever in doing, speaking of the system, is getting people to believe in a system, in a dogma, instead of actually just believing in God. And I have found in my experience that people who genuinely have a belief in God, like genuinely have a belief in God over religion, even though they might be a part of a religion, the core of their belief is in God, typically don't mind when their beliefs in religion are challenged because they're able to fulfill within their heart this love of God. And so the thought, the opinion around religion is okay to be challenged. However, when people don't really believe in God, but rather believe in a system, that's when the triggers start. That's when people become absolutely abhorrent. That's when we get things like the Inquisition, the Crusades, because it's not God the person believes in, it's a system that the person believes in. And when the system is challenged, that's when the triggers come out. And so I would implore you that if this does trigger you, maybe that's time to self-reflect and ask yourself, do you actually believe in God or do you believe in a system? Because let me tell you something, you don't have to have religion to know there's a God. You don't have to have religion to be complete within yourself. You don't have to have religion to have faith in something bigger than you. And so, you know, is your belief in the dogma that's created by man or in something that is bigger than all of us and is a mystery to all of us? That's all I'll say about that. But nonetheless, they have gotten us in this fear state of believing in this system. Christianity has become the biggest religion of the world, which again cracks me up because common sense here, we know common sense ain't so common. And maybe this is cognitive dissonance. I don't know. But we know every single aspect of our life has been corrupted. But yet people think the biggest religion in the world hasn't been corrupted. Of course it's been corrupted. Of course. Duh. And so we see this fear state, right? We see people weaponizing God. And so quite genius. It's a genius plan. How they work this out, the patience they've had all these centuries to get people in this state of fear to accept this system of religion. And then they become, it's like Stockholm syndrome. You scare people for centuries, you burn them at the stake, you do all these things, you tell them they're going to hell, and then they start to submit so that you'll leave them alone. But then over time, it's like people hurt people, so the abused becomes the abuser. So it's quite brilliant the way that they've done this. Yeah, I also think what has happened, and I mentioned this with Catherine, that I feel like the powers that be, again, for entertainment and educational purposes only, they use the extreme left as a decoy. I'm realizing that now. They use the extreme left as a decoy, so it pushed most of us into the right, and then it pushed more people back into the church. And the thing that's kind of clever about that too is that for those of us who think the extreme left is a little goofy, we're not used to being wrong, right? So what's happened in the extreme right is this like ego, this huge ego has been born. And so for them to have to now sit back and reflect and maybe consider the fact that they maybe were duped, it's going to be hard for them. They're going to react with violence and they're going to do the bidding of the establishment in that way. They're going to protect their abuser because they don't want to admit that they could have been wrong. We're so used to pointing at the other side and being like, they're goofy, they're weird, they don't understand they're trying to shut us up. But when we have to sit back and reflect on ourselves and see the same wokeism, the same censorship happening, that's hard for people to do. It's hard for people to admit that they also were wrong. It's easy to point at someone else and say you're crazy and you're wrong. It's hard to do it with yourself. And so they've really fortified, in my opinion, the establishment has really fortified this very strong stronghold on the extreme right, right through religion. And I think that's what we're gearing up for now is the original Operation Bluebeam, which is hologram Jesus. So Sergei Monas was telling us about this in the 1900s, that they were going to put a hologram Jesus in the sky. Not to mention the fact that they all have us, when we, and even for me, even after I've done all this research and I know all this, when I think of Jesus, my mind goes to the picture that we've all seen of Jesus, right? We all know that picture. It's in all of our churches, Protestant, Catholic, Mormon, Jehovah's Witness. It's all the Pantene Pro V flowing hair and the blue eyes. Well, you know the picture. That we know. That's what comes into my mind, even though I know that. That's Cesare Borgia. That is Cesare Borgia. I've covered the Borgias. They're a fun family to study. Thank God we don't live in the same time as them. But they were a Renaissance family. Their father was a pope. I know that might sound weird, but back then all the popes had kids. And Cesare was one of the Pope's sons. And he, Ravi, sorry if you guys hear weird noises. My dog is like cleaning himself right now. Um, so this guy, Cesare Borgia, Machiavellian, the book about Machiavelli, that's based off of Cesare Borgia. He was a sadistic, womanizing freak, like total sociopath, total psychopath. And he had his portrait done and that portrait has become Jesus. And so they've conditioned us to believe that Jesus looks this certain way, which we know realistically that's not what Jesus would have looked like. And that is the image they're going to put in the sky, basically of Cesare Borgia, to make us believe that the second coming is here so that we do what hologram Jesus tells us to do, not realizing that according to the original teachings of the Christ is that it is an internal consciousness. It's a rising of consciousness. Jesus said in the Bible, heaven and hell is inside of you. He also said that in the Gospel of Thomas Didymus, one of the most famous missing books of the Bible, where they ask Jesus where heaven is. And I'm paraphrasing. He says, if it's in the water, the fish will get there first. If it's in the sky, the birds will get there first. It is inside of you. It's inside of you. It's a rising of the Christ consciousness. That's what that is. It's not an external thing. And that, again, is the difference between the dark and the light, right? The light goes inside. The light goes inside to pull the light out of ourselves, to find peace of mind within ourselves, to find that faith within ourselves. The darkness looks outside of themselves for serenity, for salvation. And so I just wanted to clarify that because they were clever. Now, after Sergei Monas spilled the beans, basically, they started to change Bluebeam and they made it aliens now. Now, don't get me wrong, they could probably still do aliens, hologram aliens, but I have a feeling that hologram aliens might have been a decoy as well because they might be going back to their original hologram Jesus, especially after Charlie Kirk incident, all that weirdness which we've covered. It just seems really apparent to me. And so I feel like now is a really good time to review this again to kind of get the word out so that we're protected because knowledge is power, knowledge protects. Again, do your own research. Don't take what I have to say as fact. Do your own research. Now, again, I've covered Sergei Monas before. I know I'm kind of all over the place. It was one of the research projects I did at the very beginning that deeply affected me because it scared the crap out of me. But I cannot find that video on my YouTube channel anymore. So YouTube must have axed it. And this was before I had the R platform. So that original work is gone. With that being said, though, when I originally covered Sergei Monas, I did not actually go into the Toronto protocols, what he called his project. I just basically talked about him and what he was telling people. It was a shorter Monday Mystery video. But I recently decided, since this has come up, we probably should talk about this again, that I needed to order a copy of his work. Now, I did get this off of Amazon, so I understand that it could be compromised. Absolutely, it could be compromised, but nonetheless, this is all we have to work with. And so I just ask you as we're going through this to keep an open mind and always do your own research, always create your own opinions. And again, if you want to get your own copy, get your own copy. I'm going to try to keep this on YT. So with that being said, I can't, there's going to be some words that I'm not going to be able to say. I hope you guys understand why. Hopefully, given the context of what we're talking about, you will be able to figure out what that word that I'm not saying is. But you guys know we got to play the game. We can't martyr ourselves and take ourselves out of the game because then what good does that do us? What good does that do people if we just decide not to communicate because we can't communicate, then that means they win, right? So we have to play the game. This is their platform, it's their rules. We have to play the game in order to stay in the game. So I thank you guys for understanding. I have not actually read through this yet myself, but I do know what's in it because I did cover it. But let me just read the back of the book to you guys quickly to give you an idea. All right, you guys, so we're going to read the back of the book just to give you a bit of an understanding of what we're about to get into. Once again, there's some words I can't say, but you'll be able to figure it out. We're going to be going back to the 1960s. A lot happened in the 1960s, especially with the three-letter agency and all the fun stuff, the fun party favors, we'll say, that were going on in the world. Anyway, controlled chaos, right? The end of June 1967 marks the final preparations for the implementation of a plan for the fall of nations by the higher authorities of the Anglo-Saxon Freemasonry in Toronto. This highly confidential secret meeting is organized by the 666, as they call themselves, those who lead the six largest global banks, the six largest energy consortiums on the planet, and the six largest agro-food consortiums, which include these. The 666, being the highest leaders of international finance, will define a common strategy within their meeting to impose absolute control over global trade and the energy weapon, also Blue Beam. In this work, Sergei Monas unveils two explosive documents. I can't say the first one because it's so the first one revolves around vital for the sake of profitable occult and the Red Dawn official report of June 1985 of the 666 and 27 protocols on the total control of the planet by taking hold of the IMF, GATT, the Brussels Commission, NATO, and the UN and other international organizations. After a brief objective observation of global events that occurred over the last 50 years, we can reasonably confirm that the scenario described in these two documents is more than plausible and allows us to conceive today what seemed inconceivable only yesterday. All right, so let's get into it, guys. Now I'm going to tell you, I'm going to read Sergei Monast's bio because God bless him. RIP, my friend, RIP. Without him, we would not know any of this information, and so all credit goes to him for educational and entertainment purposes only. Sergei Monast, 1945 to 1996, was a Canadian investigative journalist, poet, and essayist. He is known to English-speaking readers mainly for Blue Beam Project. He was an active member of the Social Credit Party of Canada. In the early 1990s, he started writing on themes of the New World Order and conspiracies hatched by secret societies, being partially inspired by the works of William Guy Carr. He founded the International Free Press Agency, where he published most of his works on these themes, achieving some prominence with an interview on esotericist and ufologist Richard Glenn's TV show, Esoterisme Experimentale, in French. I probably butchered that, but he is French Canadian, in which he repeatedly warned his audience about the dangers of a one world government. In 1994, he published Le Project Bluebeam, in which he detailed his claims that NASA, with the help of the United N-word, was attempting to implement a new age religion with the Antichrist at its head and start a new world via a technology simulating second coming of Christ. He also gave talks on this topic. In 1995, he published his most detailed work, Les Protocoles de Toronto, this work, which comes from modeled upon another book that I can't say, because I know YT will not like that. It has to do with Zionist. Whereas he said a Masonic group calling 666 had for 20 years been gathering the world's powerful to establish this new order and control the minds of individuals. By 1995 and 1996, Mossad said he was being hunted by the police and authorities for the involvement in a network of prohibited information. He was unalived of a heart attack in his home in December of 1996 at age 51, the day after being arrested and spending a night in jail under very strange and suspicious conditions. All right, you guys. So, again, we know that the term New Age is not, that's another three-letter agency word, just like, or term, just like conspiracy theorist, right? Um, because in the Eastern philosophy, none of this is in this New Age belief system, right? Like none of what is in New Age philosophy is actually in Eastern belief system. Okay, so author's note here. End of June 1967 in Montreal, there is Expo 67 in Ottawa. There are final preparations for the Centenarian of Confederation. In the US, it is the challenge of the Vietnam War, and through the country, the flower power. Again, the 60s were a crazy time. As I said in the beginning, we had the three-letter agency was dropping basically, we'll say, party favors into the masses of the human mind. We know that there were programs involving mind control that were being performed by the three-letter agency using rugs, we'll say rugs, to help create a perfect environment for these projects to be fulfilled. We also, again, had the Vietnam War. That was a shit show. Things were just going on. The world was in chaos in the 1960s, right? The summer of love. Things were in total chaos. We had the rising of certain cults like Scientology. Charles Manson was doing his thing with the family. The Process Church were leading up to David Berkowitz and the Son of Sam, which I've extensively covered. This is a hectic, crazy, crazy, crazy time. And so all of this is being, in my opinion, intentionally orchestrated to bring us to a place of chaos because most people crave stability. Most people flourish under stability. Most people want a stable government. All right. We are close to the events of May 1968 in France, the explosion of nationalism in Quebec, the Woodstock Festival in the USA, but at the same time, the end of June 1967 marks the final preparations for the development of the Plan of the Fall of Nations by the highest levels of Anglo-Saxon Freemasonry in Toronto. The secret meeting, highly confidential, is organized by the 666, so they call themselves. That is, those who run the six largest banks in the world, the six largest energy consortiums on the planet, including the oil, and the six largest consortiums of agri-food, which includes the control of the main food roads of the world. The 666, being the most senior international financiers, will define within their meeting a common strategy for absolute control over world trade, on the possession of energy weapons, the open gateway of the 21st century, the international control of food, which also includes, for them, this. Their plan boils down to three major themes: the economic, the political, and the social policies for the 70s and the 80s. If successful, it must inevitably lead to the capture of the global power with the implementation of the NWO, the same which US President George Bush will do much to promote in the early 1990s. The title of the document of the 666, From Bread and Circus Games, a phrase to describe how the emperor used to entertain and feed the masses so they would be distracted from taking an interest in politics. And that is also happening. So, in my opinion, that's not just happening with like sports and TV shows. I think that also happens here on YouTube, right? I think I get so many people that are in the comment section when I actually do literal research and show like literal receipts that comment, well, this tarot card reader said this and that. And I'm like, when have any of these tarot card readers ever been right? And that's not research. That's not research. So are you falling for the bread and circuses just in the truther world, just like they do in the normie world? Are these soothsayers like making you believe that everything's cool and under control, so it's entertaining for you and enjoy the movie? It's an entertainment so that you don't push back when you are forced to be enslaved? Bread and circus, my friends. So, just an opinion. And today's video is sponsored by a small online business that is female run called Fusion Body Studio. This is your at-home fitness boutique. Like seriously, guys, anything that you could ever want is here on Fusion Body Studio, especially for those of you who are maybe a little bit shy about going to the gym or going to a yoga studio. You can do all of this stuff in the comfort of your own home with a bunch of master teachers, including myself. So there are two prices for Fusion Body Studio. For those of you who just want the opportunity to have an exercise platform at home and nothing else, it's only $25 a month, which is literally the price of a yoga drop-in. If you want a little bit more, like you want to do the workshops and have more of a deeper understanding into movements as a whole, it's $40 a month because then you get the workshops too on top of the exercises. Still super cheap. And on top of that, if you use my name, Brice20, all caps, BRIC20 at checkout, you get an additional 20% off your first 6 months. You can't go wrong with that. That's literally like the price of like 1 cup of fancy coffee for the whole month, right? Like 1 cup of fancy coffee will pay for like the whole month of for you to have unlimited access to this fitness boutique. So again, if you're interested in joining, use Brice20 at checkout. On top of that, my friends, you also get the first 7 days for free to try it out. So we hope to see you over on Fusion Body Studio. And with that being said, let's get back to the show. The document. All the historical periods having led to the decline of civilization were quite marked, without exception, by the spirit of the wandering people. Today, we have to make so that this spirit is translated by a world society of leisure under all forms. This leisure has to consist of the hokey pokey, party favors, of sport, of travel, and leisure activities in general, but accessible to all sectors of society. The man has managed to believe that it is modern and that his modern life consists of his capacity and his possibility of being able to enjoy much, and now all of which surrounds him. Yeah, we live in a very pampered life compared to our ancestors. You know, we get to watch reality TV. I mean, I love reality TV. We get to do all these things that are entertainment based, that are just for leisure. We don't have to fight for anything. And I do think, and even though it's fun to do things, it's fun to, have friends and party and watch reality TV. Where's the balance? When I was growing up, they would tell us that TV rots your brain. TV rots your brain. But now we feel like we're doing something when we sit here and just watch like YouTubes all day of like soothsayers and it's like at what point do we have to realize that we're being played for fools? And if that means that you have to turn me off to go and do your research, then please turn me off to go and do your research. At some point, we have to take our sovereignty back. It started when I was a kid, the news came on like twice a day. Like you had the morning news and then you had the evening news, and that was it. But now we have 24-hour news cycles going on, not just on cable TV, but here on the internet as well. Propaganda is being produced. Stories are being produced. It's so not only are we in this state of where we think we have to be comfortable at all times, that we don't want to be uncomfortable, we don't want to fight for anything, we think somebody's going to come save us and do it for us. That like gets me too. Like I don't understand this. I don't understand this logic. Is it narcissism? Like I is it entitlement? I don't get it, because if we look back at history, for some reason, like now in 2025, we have all these people that think somebody else is coming to save them. Like they're don't have to fight for themselves. Like somebody else is, whether it's a government handout or it's like a military person that's going to come say, like, I'm so confused by this, because we look back at history, that has never been the case. That has never been the case. So how are we more special than our ancestors who fought for things? I had two ancestors at like 17 and 18 years old that picked up arms and walked into certain death to fight in the American Revolution for this sliver of hope that just maybe by potentially sacrificing their lives, their descendants could be free. Why didn't someone come and save them? They had to save themselves. I'm so unbelievably like, why do we feel, why are we that narcissistic to feel that we deserve to just be handed millions of dollars from the government and give our own, just be given a private plane and be given a med bed and be given this? Why do we feel so entitled to this? Like when I said the beginning of this video, like our egos have gotten so big and our pride has gotten so big, and pride cometh before the fall, that we can't even sit back and self-reflect over the course of history. Because newsflash, I mean, I know I'm speaking to the choir right now, but newsflash, your ancestors, their lives, people from the past, their lives are just as valuable as ours. We're not more special. We're not specialer than they were. We're not mommy's little fancy boys and girls. We're human beings just like they were. But they knew they had to fight for stuff. They knew they had to engage in friction. They knew they had to stand up for themselves. They knew that nobody was going to come and save them. In fact, I think most of them feared if someone said they were going to save them, because it was like getting whiplash in Europe, looking at like my ancestors specifically. This is true all over the world, but like Europe, like think about the wars of religions. Think about the 30 Years' War. Think about what was happening in England from Henry VIII, who broke with the Roman Catholic Church because of Anne Boleyn, created his own church, the Church of England, the Anglican Church of England, where he became the head of that church, which was basically the same as Catholicism, but without the Pope. I mean, basically, he just threw a temper tantrum and created his own church so that he could marry whoever he wanted. But then we had that opened the door for more Protestantism to come into England. So then we've got like Catherine Parr, his final wife, who was like super Protestant, who helped raise Edward, the son of Henry VIII, and Elizabeth. Edward was focused on being on Protestantism, so he basically threw out his father's will and gave his crown to his cousin, Lady Jane Grey, the 9 Days Queen, because he didn't want his super Catholic sister Mary to take over and undo all the Protestantism. She only lasted 9 days before she was in the Tower by Mary, who then became Bloody Mary because she was burning everybody at the stake for being Protestants when we had just had this huge push for Protestantism. Now we got to go back to Catholic. And then all of a sudden she's gone and it's Elizabeth, so it's back to Protestantism. And this pendulum is just swinging back and forth, back and forth. The people of these nations are getting whiplash and they're trying to survive. So what happens? We have peasants revolt, we have people revolting, but we also have people getting on a boat and going to a new world, the Puritans, to be like, fuck this shit. I'd rather take my chances in this new world that I know nothing about than deal with this anymore. Why do we think we're better than that? Why do we think we don't have to fight for things? Because we're in this bread and circus of egotism where we think we're these fancy little boys and girls who shouldn't get our hands dirty, when that's not what being human is about. Anyway, I know I went off on a tangent, but this whole bread and circus stuff it's so prevalent, not just with the normies, but also with the truthers. That distraction, 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 disassociation, disassociation, delusion, delusion, delusion. You're going to delude yourself right into the New World Order. All right, let's keep going. To achieve this objective, it is imperative to be able to infiltrate the media, radio, television, newspapers, YouTube, Telegram, Instagram, TikTok, settings of fashion and culture, circles of new music, by which we will influence for sure all the layers of Western society, thus taking under the control of the senses of the youth, tomorrow's adult. We will have consequently the way clear for infiltrating and transforming the depth without being disturbed, the policies and the legal system and the education, and thus allowing us to radically change the course, the future of the directions of societies covered by our plan. Why are they talking about destroying Western society? So again, Western society is no different, or no better. I should say it's very different. It's no better than Eastern society. It's just different. So, and I've spent a lot of time in the East, living in the East, and there are certain freedoms that the Western world provides that the Eastern world does not. And it's very nuanced. You know, I've said this before. I just talked about the Protestant Reformation. The Protestant Reformation, for me, is one of the most fascinating times in history, even though I'm not a fan of religion. But if we can step back and look at the Protestant Reformation from a deeper lens, not just looking at like the belief of Jesus, the belief in a pope, the belief of whether your communion actually turns into the blood and the body of Christ, or it's symbolic of it, which is a huge difference in the beginning between Protestants and Catholics. But we're looking at from a political perspective with the birth of Protestantism is capitalism. Capitalism and Protestantism go hand in hand. Now, I'm not saying that capitalism is a perfect form of government, but it sure as hell is a lot better than other forms of government. Why? Because it gives individual responsibility and self-government to the citizens. You know, you're not bound to the social circle that you're born into. It gives birth to entrepreneurship, right? That's the American dream. Is basically capitalism, is that you can be anything that you want to be if you work hard enough for it. Coming from an old feudal system of Europe where you have royalty, nobles, the gentry, the merchant class, and then the two different peasant classes, serfdom. You're just born into these things. But if you come into a more Protestant perspective of us all being equal in God's eye, that also opens up to a more fruitful economic plan of capitalism, which gives individuals the responsibility of market. Yeah, individuals. This also does open the door to nepotism, which royalty is nepotism. That's what royalty is. And honestly, I don't have a problem with like nepotism when it comes to market value products. I do with royalty. I don't think people should rule just because of their bloodline. Call me crazy, but I think you should earn and be elected to your leadership role. But when we talk about like nepotism, like if a family develops a business, they can pass it on to their children. This is all birthed out of capitalism, because then with nepotism, they take over this idea of protecting a family versus falling prey or enslavement to a system. Does that make sense? And again, I'm not saying that capitalism is perfect. It's not perfect. There are many problems with capitalism, but for better or for worse, it out of all of the governmental plans, that is definitely the one that does allow the door to open for more independent growth and sovereignty. So this all came again with the Protestant Reformation. Once again, that was because with the Protestant Reformation, we had people reevaluating their religious beliefs in the power of a pope. So the power of a human person being able to dictate salvation. And so it translates into, well, if this person really doesn't have the power to give me the condition of my soul, then I can now basically take my own soul into my hands, and that will then, of course, bleed into other areas of life. I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, let me know. We can discuss it more in the comment section. Okay. So the Western world, sorry, that was a roundabout way of saying the Western world has to fall. It has to fall for this one world government to come into control. It has to fall because you cannot have independent thinkers. You cannot have capitalism. You cannot have entrepreneurs, people who self-govern, people who are willing to get up and work hard for themselves. We need people willing to get up and work hard for the system, not for themselves, right? So that's why the Western society has to fall in order for this to succeed. The populations, we know it, do not have any historical memory. They tirelessly repeat mistakes of the past without realizing that these mistakes had driven their forefathers before them to the same forfeitures, as they will live for the worse before the end of the century. See, for example, that their grandfathers had lived at the beginning of the century thanks to the relentless work of our predecessors. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, that's why the United States, I've been talking about the United States cannot become a theocracy. Absolutely should never be a theocracy. We should never have a government that's run by a religion, because that's not how our forefathers set it up. As I was just talking about, they were coming from Europe where people were being burned at the stake for a different opinion on the same religion. It is dangerous when religion gets mixed with politics. Religion, spiritual belief should be a personal endeavor, not a political one. Politics and government should remain secular in order to ensure that all people are free to believe how they want to believe. But we forget this, as they're saying, we forget this. Again, we're looking at the extreme right. The extreme right wants to implement basically a theocracy in the United States, which honestly, like, that's terrifying because of what happened in Europe. I mean, even today, look at the Middle East. That's a theocracy. Terrifying, right? So we forget the reason why our forebears created certain systems because they had experienced what it's like to not have these certain protections in place. Okay. After having experienced without limitation the liberation of the morals, the abolition of morality, in other words, the wandering of the spirit, they experienced the economic crisis and then war. Today, their grandchildren and their children will go straight to an outcome similar, even worse, because this time he will finally allow us to establish our new world order, but none of them are able to realize this. They will all be too preoccupied to excessively satisfy their most primal sensual needs. We're too entitled, we're too spoiled. I'm right, they're wrong. The left is crazy. No, Christianity is right. I can't be wrong. I can't be wrong in my opinions. How dare you say I'm wrong? You're wrong. It's right here, guys. It's right here in black and white. Genius plan, isn't it? Genius. A standard generally more important that has already proven itself at the beginning of this century is the construction and implications of the communist system by the late senior offices of our lodge in the profitable of the exception. In principle, we know the exception proves the general rule that is contrary to it. But in our vocabulary, it is the exception that should be imposed to all. We need to make sure to make exceptions in different spheres of society as being new rules applicable to all conditions, a primary object of all the future social protests carried out by the nation's youth. Self-explanatory, right? Thus, exception will become the fuse by which all the historical societies will collapse on itself in shortness of breath and an unprecedented confusion. We're the exception. We think we're the exception to the rule. We think we're entitled to do like as they're saying with a communist structure. I mean, obviously it doesn't work. I mean, hello, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. Marxism, communism, socialism doesn't work. Here in the United States, we have refugees. We have people that immigrated here from the USSR or from China, people who are here under political asylum. And many of them have spoken out because for some reason, the youth of today think that what didn't work in their country will work in ours. We're the exception. We're the exception. It's all about that ego, building that false sense of self, that illusion of grandeur when it comes to human beings. That makes sense to me. I hope that makes sense to you. The foundation of the Western society in their essence originated from a straight line from Judeo-Christian. Yeah, I haven't even read that, and I was just saying this, guys. I was just saying this. It is precisely the same heritage which is made of family, the node, the cornerstone of all existing social structures. Our predecessors who had financed the revolutionary writers of the late 19th century and early 20th century had understood the importance to divide and then to shatter the vital nucleus if they wanted to in Russia to succeed in setting up the new communist system at that time. I was just saying that. The Western world has to fall because with the Protestant Reformation came capitalism. Capitalism is the exact opposite of communism. And when you have capitalism, you have things like nepotism within families, caring of a family, nurturing of a family, right? You don't have that in communism because the family is the state. The God is the state. You worship and serve the state. When you have capitalism, when you have a secular capitalism government, you're ensuring the people their freedom to worship, believe, and work how they want to believe. Hope that makes sense. So the communist system is no different than a theocracy, right? The extreme left and the extreme right are the same. Communism and fascism, the same. Whether the government is run by a religion or by the state, it's still the same. You're still worshiping a system. And that is precisely what they did by making meticulously produced by nonconformist philosophers and writers at the same time a manifesto to the glory of the God state, which shall have absolute priority on the individual, on the family. To end with certainty in the construction of a world government, where all individuals, without exception, will be subject to the world state of the new order, we have to first of all remove the family, what will entail at the same moment the disappearance of the ancestral religious teachings. And in the second place, level all the individuals by removing social classes, in particular the middle classes. But we have to proceed in such a way that all of these changes appear as arising from the popular will, that they have the appearance of democracy. I want to talk about that for a second, about the bourgeoisie, the middle class. People are always like, oh, it's so bougie, it's so bougie. Bourgeoisie means middle class. It doesn't mean upper class, it means middle class. The middle class of nations is the most, well, I mean, we're all important, but in order to stabilize a country, you need a middle class. You absolutely need a middle class. Again, this started actually, there's a really great history professor on TikTok that I love to watch, and she talked about this with Henry VII. When the Tudor dynasty came in, you had this merchant class, right? Like nobles in this old system of government that they had in Europe, that our forefathers, a lot of us, if you're European American, escaped, or European Canadian escaped. They had the gentry, the nobles, who were like, they were liberty holders or landholders. That was where most of their assets were, was in land. Yeah. They had liquidated wealth as well, but they also had bloodline wealth, as far as like this idea that their family came from this particular nobility or gentry class. But with the rising of the merchant class, we have something totally brand new. And this is what we call new money, nuevo riche. Okay. These are people who have earned their money. They haven't inherited it, they've earned it through mercantile, through business, through capitalism. So Henry VII, he can't really take from nobility or the gentries, so he starts to tax the merchants. Okay, the middle class then starts to grow. The power, the negotiating power of the middle class. Again, we see that in France with the bourgeoisie. That's the French word. That's where it comes from. In the United States, the middle class is very important. And we have the middle class even divided up into upper middle class, lower middle class. So what does this mean? Let's talk about like the upper middle class, for example, which I think a lot of people in my walk of life come from, is like upper middle class, where you have families who do have wealth. They have wealth, but they're also hardworking. They have family businesses. They're raising their children to follow in their footsteps, right? They're educating their children. They're investing in their family because their family isn't really necessarily relying on a royal bloodline, but through this hard work of this merchant class, this middle class, upper middle class, which comes individualized through a family, through a father passing down his business to his son, through a mother teaching her daughter how to do, how to manage things, how to manage the house. We also get that with the rising of the middle class. We have the beautiful establishment of stay-at-home mothers. Yeah. We all of a sudden have this peasant, we'll say peasant group of people who aren't born nobility, the rising of the middle class, they're not born nobility, but they're able now to afford for the mother to stay at home and the father to go and work, and the whole family can live off of one income. So the mother is there to cook home cooked meals, to nurture the children, to discipline the children, to be available and a stability for the family so the children grow up stable. So this is really important what he's saying. Again, it all goes back to that Protestant Reformation and that growing of capitalism in the Western world that provides this avenue of freedom. So whether you were born upper class, lower class, or middle class, the lower class needs the middle class, the upper class, we all need the middle class. The middle class is vitally important to a structure of a society. Okay, to end with certainty in the construction of a world government, okay, I already read that. And using isolated cases, but amplifying them to the extreme with the help of student protests infiltrated by us, journalists, favorable to our cause, and politicians purchased, we will be able to put in place new organizations having all appearances of modern as the Office of Child Protection, protected by Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Child Protective Services. Child Protective Services, I also think, in my opinion, this also comes through public schools. I think that they are now taking over, so now the kid belongs to the state, not you. Yeah. Child Protective Services here in the United States can be called on any family. Any family. The government is watching. And they're right. Like, we can do this. They brought this in through modern views. Like, as for me as a person too, like, having child protective services, is that all the way bad? Like there are cases where kids need protecting. But you see how they're doing it? You see how they're doing it? For the success of our world plan, it is necessary to us to make implements in all Western societies of the 70s, offices for the protection of children, among which the officials of young intellects without experience, fresh out of university, where a highlighted of international principles will comply literally without proper judgment, the Charter of the Rights of the Child. Who will dare to oppose this without being identified at the same time with the barbarians of the Middle Ages? So they're targeting kids out of college who don't have life experience. They don't have the wisdom to understand the fallacies in some of these beliefs. This charter, painstakingly developed in our lodges, we will finally eliminate any parental authority in the family by shattering people fiercely opposed to one another for the protection of their personal interest. It will encourage children to denounce parents very authoritarian because too traditional or too religious. It will contribute thus to subjecting parents to a collective psychosis of fear, which inevitably will cause, in a general way in society, a relaxation of parental authority. Thus, we shall have succeeded in the first instance to produce a society similar to that of Russia of the 1950s, where the children denounced their parents to the state, and this without anyone noticing. That also happened in Yahtzee, Germany, where the children were encouraged to turn their parents to the state if their parents were speaking terribly of Hitler and his friends. This will then be of disconcerting ease than to transfer this role of the state in relation to the child to the highest international bodies, such as the United Nations. Understand this. Our goal is not to protect children or anyone from another, but to cause the collapse and subsequent fall of nations, which are major obstacles to the implementation of the new world order. This is why the Office of Child Protection must be invested with absolute legal authority. They must be able, as they see fit, but always under the pretext of protecting the child, to remove them from their original home environments and place them in family backgrounds or foreign government centers that have been established for our internationalist principles and religions. Therefore, it will complete the final breaking of the Western family unit. But without the protection and the monitoring of their original parents, these children will be permanently handicapped in their psychological and moral development and consequently represent natural prey, easily adaptable to our global aspirations. We've definitely seen that happen with the left, like for sure. I know you guys are all thinking about what this means, but I want you guys to also think about this coming from the extreme right. How many parents hand their children basically over to a church or an indoctrination process that, in a sense, takes the power away from the wisdom of the parent and puts it into a system outside of the family unit? So this is happening all over. For guaranteed success of such an enterprise, it is essential that civil servants working in these offices in the service of the state are young, without past experience, imbued with theories which we know empty and ineffective, and especially should be obsessed with the missionary spirit of the great protectors of children at risk, manipulating the youth to do their dirty work. Because for them, all parents must represent a potential criminals, potential hazard to the welfare of children, here to be considered a god. An Office of Child Protection and the Bill of Rights of Child have no reason to be without children at risk. In addition, the exceptions and the historical examples used for their implementation eventually, sooner or later, disappearing if they were not constantly fed with new cases occurring on an ongoing basis. That's interesting, right? Like I said earlier, from a practical perspective, we can understand as good people why there would need to be a child protective services. There are cases where children need to be, or parents, there need to be laws so that parents don't abuse their kids. Like there are cases where that is happening. However, this is interesting. What are they saying here? It seems like they're saying that these legitimate cases are few and far between. Few and far between. Yeah, you might have strict parents here and there. You might think that some of your friends' parents parented better than you or are stricter than you, but when it comes to actually crossing the line into abuse where the child needs protection, those are few and far between. So they're having to create ongoing cases. They're having to create a legal system where there is a little bit more leniency on the state to create cases. I think about families that have like rug problems, we'll say, and the state has to get involved. And I'm not saying that there shouldn't be a protective agencies for children whose parents have those issues. Like their parents are sick, they need help. But it doesn't mean the parents are bad, but there needs to be protection for the children because when the parents are in that state of mind, they might not be able to provide the best protection for them. But why not let the kids go stay with a relative, a grandparent, an aunt or uncle? The state always comes in and determines that. It's to create ongoing cases, right? Let's see here. So let's start that paragraph over again. An Office of the Child Protection and Bill of Rights of the Child have no reason to be without children at risk. In addition, the exceptions and the historical examples used for their implementations eventually sooner or later disappearing if they were not constantly fed with new cases occurring on an ongoing basis. In this sense, we must infiltrate the educational system of the nations in order to make disappear under the cover of modern and evolution the teachings of religion, history, and good manners will deleting at some point under an avalanche of new experiments in the milieu of education, that of language and mathematics. In this way, by removing from the younger generations any basis and any moral boundary, all knowledge of the past, and therefore any national pride, so all respect for others, all power and knowledge of the language of science, and thus reality, we will help build a youth largely disposed of all forms of crime. In this new universe, fragmented by fear of parents and their abandonment of all responsibility regarding their children, we will have a clear path to form in our own way and according to our primary objectives, a youth where arrogance, contempt, humiliation of others will be considered a new basis of affirmation of self and freedom. Holy shit! They are so clever, right? They're so clever. They get the arrogance, the entitlement. They teach them to not question the science when science basically is a study of questioning everything. Yeah. And now we see that with parents. I saw that with my parents growing up. Like we have to do what the school wants you to do for educational purposes so we can get you into college. You have to meet these requirements provided by the state. We think that's a good thing because it's ensuring the education of every child. But what education is it? Is it a literal education of knowledge or is it indoctrination? Because if you study like Hypatia, who we've covered Hypatia on this channel before, and all these ancient teachers, their classrooms were built in one of debate, of conversation, not of regurgitation and memorization. I believe firmly that most of the kids that were labeled as gifted in school are the ones that were easily programmed, generally speaking. And the kids who were labeled as having learning disabilities or not smart were actually the ones that were probably the smartest because they could critically think. So we've shaped this society where free thinkers, critical thinkers, are considered dumb. And from a very young age, they're told they're dumb. They're put down. They're put in slow classes, so their self-esteem starts to wilt. And the ones that can memorize and regurgitate are the ones that are praised as being super smart when they're not super smart. They can't critically think. My mother used to tell us all the time when we were kids that she would much rather my sister and I have street smarts, have common sense, than book smarts. And education was important to my family. We all have high levels of education, but my mother was very funny about that she would rather our academic grades drop a little bit and us go out into the world and have parties and learn how to be street smart, have discernment in the world than be so academically smart that we had no discernment, no common sense. Because street smarts and common sense, that's the real intelligence. That's the real intelligence. All right. So that makes sense, right? But we know from past experience even that a similar youth is already doomed of self-destruction because this fundamentally individualistic and so antichrist by definition. In this sense, it cannot possibly represent a solid basis for continuity of any society whatsoever, and even less a sure value for the care of its elderly. Not to, back in the ancient times, in most of our cultures, the elderly were seen as wise. The wise old owl. That's where the word witch comes from, right? The word witch, its etymology is a wise older woman. Now, one thing I want to say too before we go on, I don't know if I've said this yet, but I'm going to say it again just in case I have or have not. This is being translated from French into English. And looking at this, there's a lot of grammatical errors. There's some spelling errors, which is totally fine. I'm so grateful somebody translated it. It's still digestible. But if some of these sentences feel a little off, it's probably because of the things were lost in translation, basically. Anyway, in the same vein, it is also imperative to create a charter for rights and individual freedom and the office of citizen protector by dangling to the masses that these innovations are part of the modern world of new societies of the 20th century. In the same manner, at the same time, but at another level, to pass new laws for the respect and individual freedoms, as in the case of the family, but on the level of society. These laws will come into conflict with the rights of the community, thereby leading the societies mentioned right to their self-destruction. Because here, the inversion is complete. It is no longer society, which is the right of the majority. So society is the right of the majority that must be protected against individuals that can threaten, but rather the right of the individual, which needs to be protected against the potential threats of the majority. This is the goal we set. That makes so much sense to me. I mean, think about it this way. We have these things in today's society like my truth. This is my truth. What do you mean it's your truth? There's just the truth. I think what's important, like I love studying psychology because I love the human mind. I love philosophy, all that kind of stuff. And I get it. Like we understand that people do certain things because of past traumas. However, I think sometimes we've gone a little too far with that. We've gone a little too far with giving people a break for their behaviors because of something that happened to them as a kid. Two things can be true. We can acknowledge that somebody had a hard upbringing, but also hold them accountable for harm that they have caused somebody else. Just because their truth is that they were hurt doesn't excuse them from hurting other people to this day. We also look at this with things like feelings are not facts. We know with the extreme left, we have to say that a lot. Feelings are not facts. Feelings are not facts. Your emotions around something does not mean that that is the truth of the situation. In fact, there's a personality disorder called borderline personality disorder, which basically means a person with this disorder feels like their literal emotions that they are feeling are the absolute truth, and so it causes erratic behavior. We need to come back to a place in society where we can experience our emotions, observe our triggers, and not react to them. Understand that how we are feeling about something is our own perception in that moment. It might not be the truth, right? It might be reactionary on our part. We see this with religion. Feelings are not facts. How many times have I been told by Christians that I'm going to go to hell because I basically tell them factually that the Bible has been edited over 15 times, or excuse me, over 50 times since the 1700s. That is a fact. That is an actual record fact. The Bible has been changed over 50 times since the 1700s. But I'm told I'm going to hell because people are being triggered because they've been taught to believe the Bible is the word of God, and because they have a belief system and emotional perception of that. When they hear the truth, they react on the emotional perception because that emotional perception is giving them their truth, which is not the truth, right? It's not the truth. Yeah? Feelings are not facts. You could say, oh, I have a faith in that, I have a faith in that. Well, if you have a faith in something, you should not behave violently when somebody challenges your feelings on the matter. So that's showing you how they're programming you to believe your truth. So just like the extreme left has their truths over their gender or whatever, the extreme right also has their truths over religion. And they react the same way because there's only one truth. The truth is not negotiable. It just is. Clever, isn't it? They've set a really, these people are smart. They're diabolical, but they're smart. To complete the breakdown of the family, the education system, thus the society in general, is essential to encourage schmessual freedom, the hokey pokey, on all levels of Western society. It is necessary to reduce the individual, therefore the masses, to the obsession of satisfying their primal instincts by all means possible. We know this step represents the culmination by which any society will eventually collapse on itself. Had it not been so in the Roman Empire at the height and similar to all civilizations throughout history, I have spoken about this many times, many times. I am not a prude by any stretch of the imagination. I don't believe you should wait until marriage. I think that the hokey pokey is very sacred, but I also do not believe in spreading yourself open for anybody. Spiritually speaking, when you are intimate with somebody, you are now sharing karma with that person to become one, literally, to become one in that act. You are taking on your partner's karma, and they are thus taking on your karma. You are now connected at a very energetic, in a very energetic way. That's why they call it, shmeksh magic. Yeah. And that magic, just like any magic, can be good, used for good or for bad. So when you're out there being promiscuous, when you're out there in like no seriously spiritual person, listen to me when I say this. I've said this before. No seriously spiritual person who has seriously studied spiritual text will ever be in an open relationship or have multiple partners because they know better. They know better. If you want to double your karma, triple your karma, make it sure that you're going to have to come back multiple times, have multiple partners because you're tripling your karma. And then if you're also being intimate with multiple people, but not telling a specific partner you're doing that, you're bringing all of that karma into that person too without consent. This is serious. Like, this is serious. Every time a relationship ends, it is my advice every time a relationship ends that you stay celibate for at least 6 months in order to filter through all of that karma so that you are not damaging yourself or the next person that you're with. It is so important to make sure that when you do this with somebody else that you are damn sure that you are ready for that. This is not some first date shenanigans. This is not some second date shenanigans or third date shenanigans. That intimacy should happen after you absolutely are certain that you're willing to go down that road with that person. It's called self-control. Yes, we have biological needs. Yes, we have desires, but we also have self-control. It's like no different than knowing you have to exercise every day, even if you don't want to. It's that self-control and discipline that gets you out of the bed and running or working out that you also have to use when it comes to romantic relationships. Have self-control before you become completely intimate with somebody. If you are a serious spiritual person, you are monogamous. So what they're doing is they're making it seem like the cool people, it's cool. We can just share. We can just share everything. No. There's this podcast that I listen to. It's called Small Town Murders. It's the funniest podcast. These two comedians that go through these like crime scene. It's a great podcast. But they were talking on one of the podcasts about literally the only difference between having a friend and dating someone is boinking. Like the person you're boinking is it's just a different type of friend, but there's no difference. Like my friends that I am not romantically involved with, like it's the same thing. We're sharing time together, we love each other, we enjoy each other's company, but this one other person, my boyfriend, there's just one thing I do differently with him than I do with anybody else, and that's intimacy. You're not a prude because you're monogamous. You're smart. You're smart. And you've got self-control. The powers that be don't want any of us having self-control. Because if we have self-control, they're in trouble. We don't need to live off of our emotions. That's one thing you learn in traditional yoga, yoga chitta vritti nirodha. I'm not supposed to believe everything that I think. I have to let myself think something, feel something, but not react right away. Let me sit with it. Let me integrate it into my being so that I can see all perceptions of the situation before I make emotion. But if we're all just living off of emotion and just living off of our truths, then if we're caring more about the individual than the mass majority, then we've got chaos. We've got vigilante chaos. All right. By men of science in laboratories funded by our lodges, we have managed to develop a chemical process that will revolutionize all the Western societies and regulate to oblivion forever. Moral principles. Let me read that again. Again, this has been translated from French, so sometimes these sentences are run-on, sometimes they're fragments. No shame. I could not translate this to French. So for the person who translated this, like, thank you, no shame. It's no big deal, but let me reread that again. By men of science in laboratories funded by our lodges, we have managed to develop a chemical process that will revolutionize all the Western societies and regulate to oblivion forever the moral principles. This process in pill form will open the way wide to the schmessual freedom without consequences and push the women of the nations to want to break with what will then be perceived as the yoke of the past. The slavery of women subjected to men in the traditional Judeo-Christian family. Y'all know what pill they're talking about. I've actually never been on that birth control. Never. From a very young age, it freaked me out. From a very young age, I felt a visceral response. No, no. If you can stop my body from doing something that it is supposed to do, dropping an egg, then that to me is not okay. That's why I don't wear tampons. I just don't. It's disturbing to me to put something like that inside my body for hours, something that's synthetic like that. Like that is weird to me. So now this is interesting because Catherine and I have talked about this. Yeah, there are some women that end up in very horrific relationships. I do think divorce should be a thing. I've been in an abusive relationship before. It's not cool. But I know that but again, in a normal society where my truth or your truth isn't being pushed, I do think these are few and far between. I like being a woman. I like working too. Like I'm a very creative person. I love doing YouTube. I love creating these stories. I love teaching. I love doing Fusion Body Studio. But in my home with my boyfriend, we take on very traditional roles. I know that's surprising because we're not legally married or anything like that, but I take care of the house. I make the bed up every morning. I do all the laundry. I do all the heavy cleaning. He does a lot of the cooking, but I make sure that our house is a home. That's my job. He's the one that's out every day working, paying the bills, taking my car to get the oil changed, and so that's how we serve each other. I'm not enslaved to him. I'm not enslaved to him. I have a roof over my head because of him. I have food in the refrigerator because of him. I have clothes to wash because of him. So I give back to him by making sure the house is clean, by making sure his underwear is folded in his drawers. We are in service to each other. So what they're doing, and if you want to follow, my boyfriend has a channel now called The Confused Wanderer, where he's going through the law of one, where we look at the template of service to others versus service to self. So what they are doing essentially is they are turning people who are by nature service to others and making them selfish service to self. So if I'm in a relationship, excuse me, even if it wasn't with my boyfriend, but another man, and that man was providing me with a life, I would want to then do something for him. Make sure that there was food, warm food on the table when he got home from work. Make sure that his pants were ironed and hung up. Make sure that the bed was made and everything was tidied up and his underwear were folded in the drawer where they belong. I would want to do that to say thank you to him for him giving me a life. And him giving me a life is him saying thank you to me for making sure his home is being managed, right? Especially if you throw kids in the mix. Formerly center and pivot of the family unit, the modern woman, now as an independent individual, wants to break with its traditional role, break away from family, and lead her life according to their own personal aspirations. Nothing more natural, we know, but where we will intervene strongly, it will be to infiltrate the new feminine protest movements by pushing their logic to its extreme limits of consequence. And these limits can be found already registered in the definitive breakdown of traditional family society, right? So as I said, even though we don't have kids, I still work. I still have I love my job, but I'm provided the opportunity because my job doing YouTube or Fusion Body teaching doesn't really pay the bills. But I'm afforded that opportunity to serve people and help people and do what I love because of my boyfriend's ability to pay for everything else that needs to be taken care of. So we are in a that's what a partnership is. So in this feminist movement that they're talking about, we're talking about getting rid of a partnership. And then men that fall for it, this is what gets me so mad. There are so many men that fall for this shit too. And so they get together with these women and they expect their woman to work full time outside the house just like they are, but then they also expect the woman to run the house as well. So these men now have become even more of a dictator, even more of a tyrant than they were perceived to be beforehand because they're forcing the woman to do a full-time job where she's bringing in an income, but also be responsible for making sure the house is clean, making sure dinner is on the table, making sure the kids get to their soccer lessons and piano lessons, while the man just has one job to do. And then he comes home, puts his feet up, gets his little whiskey in his glass, and relax while the mother goes and does a full-time job and then has to come home and work another full-time job. So this feminist movement that they've pushed has actually forced women to be more enslaved than they were before. By some men, not by all men, but by some men. The schmexual liberation will be the ultimate means by which it will be possible to us to remove the popular consciousness, any reference to good and evil. The collapse of this moral barrier will permit us to finish the process of the false liberation of man's past, by which in reality it is a form of slavery. I just said that, didn't I? In reality, what they're pushing is a form of slavery that will be profitable to our globalist plans. And we also know that if the mother isn't home, then the child is where is the child doing after school activities at school, being minded by other people, not by their parents. This opens the door for encouragement of sexual freedom, to the divorce, to abortion on demand, to legal recognition of diverse forms of all sorts of sexuality, will help us to radically change the historical basis of the legal right of societies. It be a major asset to push for all the individuals in a general relaxation of the morals, to divide the individuals as compared against each other according to their instincts and their own interests, to destroy the future of the youth by pushing the adverse experiences of early sexualities and removal of a baby, and to break morally the future generations by pushing them to alcoholism, different rugs, with which our senior international lodge officers will take charge of the control at the world level, and in the removing oneself from life, unaliving oneself, that it be considered by a youth disillusioned and abandoned to themselves as being the chivalrous end. So they're just fucking with us basically. Now, when it comes to like removing a baby, I've always been pro-choice, always. For me personally, I would never do it because I don't need to do it, right? And if I got pregnant, I would be a mom. That's just me. But I'm not gonna. There are situations I feel like where there needs to be intervention, but at the rate at which it's happening now, it's not cool, right? It's not cool. And then getting people into a position where the only option they feel like they have in life is to unalive themselves, that's terrible. Terrible. Let us deceive the youth of the nations by showing him to their parents as being irresponsible, atheistic, immoral, searching after all only for the pleasure, for the escape, and for the wild satisfaction of their instincts at the price of the lie, the hypocrisy, and the treason. Let us make of the divorce and the removal of a baby a new social custom accepted by all, thus encouraging him to criminality under all forms and take refuge in different groups out of reach of the family environment, and it will perceive inevitably as being a threat for its own survival. The social fabric being so upset forever, it will be possible for us from then on to act on political and economics of nations to subject them in our thank you, to come here, to come there, to accept of strength our plans for the new world order. It's just getting people desperate. That's what I mean. I think you guys get that by dissolving the family unit, it gets people desperate. Desperate times call for desperate measures. People will gladly accept help when they need help, even if it's from the institution that put them in that place to begin with. Because it is well necessary to acknowledge the nations deprived, that they will then be able to count on a strong youth, on a society where the individuals grouped around a common ideal, strengthened by indestructible moral ramparts, would have been able to provide its historical support, can only then abdicate to our global will. Thus, we can inaugurate what was so much announced by our past creations, the communist system, which prophesied a world revolution set into motion by all the rejected of the earth, and Yahtzees, by which we had announced our new world order for 1,000 years. Now, we know that about communism, we know that about socialism, fascism, but let's talk about the truther movement for a second. All these people that are sitting around thinking that the government's going to bring them money, the government's going to give them a med bed, that the government's going to come in and save them. That is no different than communism. That is communism. And a lot of these people that are clinging to this false sense of hope already feel rejected, already feel despondent. So they've put their hope into these delusions, which is opening the door for more communism. It's a consent to communism. If the government brings you a check, there's always a price to be paid. Nothing in this world is free, especially from the government. If you allow the government to take care of you, then you allow the government to control you. Get ready to be chipped. I'm talking to you, truthers. You are perfectly capable of being able to get out there and do your own work, to grow your own food, to raise your own family, to be in a monogamous, healthy relationship. You are capable of that. Do not let these institutions, do not let Telegram, do not let YouTube, do not let these false bread and circus people that are manipulating you with their soothsaying and all that kind of stuff make you feel like you have to be despondent and rely on some secret military operation that's coming to save you. Do not give your power away. That is giving your power away. That is selling your soul. What you're waiting for is no different than what Stalin, Lenin, Hitler, Mao, Mussolini, no different. It's the same. If you're waiting for a white knight from the white hats to come in with some $1 million check and a private plane and a med bed, you are no different than the people who fell for Mussolini, the people who fell for Hitler, the people who fell for Mao. It's communism, plain and simple. Just because it has a different color bow on it doesn't mean it's not the same gift. Use your discernment. Again, this is why having street smarts, having common sense ranks higher in the value of education than academic smarts. So even if you've got to turn me off, don't sit there regurgitating what somebody has told you on a social media platform, just like your friends regurgitate what CNN tells them. There's no difference. You're doing the same thing. You're just memorizing, regurgitating, memorizing, regurgitating, memorizing, regurgitating. You're not sitting there and taking the information in and actually thinking about it. Huh. So you're telling me that this group of like white knights is going to come in and it's going to bring me all this money that has to do with like my birth certificate. I'm going to get all this money. You're just going to be given to me. And I'm also going to be given a med bed to make me healthy. That's just going to be given to me. Maybe sit and think about that. How is that any different? I've been saying this for years now. How the fuck is that any different than communism? If you allow somebody to control, to take care of you, then you allow somebody to control you. If you're putting all of your hopes and dreams into a med bed and you are not learning how to take care of yourself, then you've already sold your soul. You've already sold your soul to the devil, to the system, to the beast, to the New World Order. If you're not willing to go out there and hustle and do your own work and support yourself and instead take money from a governmental system, regardless of whether that looks like welfare or Nasara, you have sold your soul. And I'm coming at you as I have been severely punished for speaking out. Severely. I make less than $1,000 a month with all of my work combined. YouTube, teaching, Fusion Body Studio. I rarely have more than $200 in my checking account at all times. I am so lucky to have my partner because they have severely punished me. The harder I work, the more I put stuff out, the less money I make. That's intentional. They're doing that to me intentionally. And I know it. And I even know how they're doing it. I've seen the contract. The main person doing it is a YouTuber who works for the 666 group. It's called controlled opposition. And that they do that. They squeeze you. They take all your resources away from you so that you will eventually shut up or you will yourself. Tale as old as time. But here's the thing, my friends, I could very easily just give up and say, fuck it, like everybody's stupid and nobody's getting it. I could easily do that and go get a corporate job, but I'm not going to because this is important. I will never bow to the system. Never. Never. I would rather face the chopping block, the guillotine, than bow to the system. And I hope to God you watching feel the same about yourself because I know for me, I'm smart. You can take, my grandfather used to say this. Both of my grandfathers would say stuff like this, but and both of my grandfathers were very wealthy. Very wealthy. One was the head of surgery, one was a filthy rich businessman. They would say, one particular, they can take everything away from you except your character. They can take everything away from me. They can take all my money from me. They can make me homeless, but they cannot take away my character. They cannot take away my authority to say no. I do not consent to your beast system. I will not consent to your beast system. I don't care if you put me on the street. There are some things worth fighting for, and there are some things worth dying for. The reason why people like me get punished, and probably you too, is because we scare them. I know I'm being punished because I'm smart and I'm influential. I know that. So I'm being shadow banned. I'm having everything taken from me because I'm smart and I'm not going to shut up. No matter how much black magic is done, no matter how much my finances are messed with, I will not shut up. I'm not a weak person. I'm a strong person, and I hope you watching too. So when this stuff starts to really play out in front of you, which it is on the extreme left and on the right, it's playing out in front of us. You can stand up and say, you're messing with the wrong bitch. I'm smarter than you. I might not be as powerful as you, but I'm fucking smarter than you. And I have scruples, and I have a soul, and you're not going to take that from me. And I know I can take care of myself. That's the thing. I know I can. I've done it before many times because I'm smart. So I hope you watching, even when you're being enticed by this witchcraft of the Sara, ooh, look at this shiny thing. You can have a private plane. You could just get in a med bed and you can be young again. I hope you watching aren't enticed by that witchcraft. And that you realize the true magic, it doesn't lie in a fancy med bed or in a check from the government. It lies within you. You're the magic. And all you got to do is say no. 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 I do not consent. I do not consent to this black magic. I do not consent to any of it. You keep doing it to me when I've said no. Well, that sucks to be you because the world, the universe don't work that way, right? It doesn't work that way. You keep pushing and doing things to people without their consent. That's conspiracy. I'm not even going to go. You're going to have a lot of karma to pay. Let's just put it that way. One way or another, karma is going to bite you in the fucking ass if you keep pushing people's consent. So please, I beg you watching, if you made it this far, thank you. I acknowledge that you two are a very smart person, very smart, and they can't take that away from you. They can take everything else away from you. They can't take that away from you. So stand in your sovereignty and just say no. Anyway, okay, where were we? This is our ultimate goal, the work rewarded for all the valorous deeds in labor for its accomplishment for centuries, saying it loud and clear, all the brothers of the lodge past died in the anonymity of this realization of this ideal to us is now possible to touch with the fingertips. It is well recognized by all that the man, once after having assured that their basic needs, food, clothing, and shelter, is much more inclined to be less vigilant. Let us allow him to lull his consciousness while orinating to our way his mind, creating in himself pure peace of favorable economic conditions. Therefore, during this period of the 70 years, where our agents will infiltrate all over the different spheres of the society to accept our new standards in education, legal law, social policy, and we will make sure to spread him around an economic climate of confidence. So if you play by our rules, we're going to make you all fancy. We're going to make you a fancy boy. We're going to give you all this money. We're going to give you a huge platform. We're going to give you everything you want because you're agreeing. You're selling us your soul. Labor for all, the opening of credit for all, leisure for all will be our boogie for the illusionary creation of a new social class, the middle class. Because once our objectives reach the class in the middle between the secular poor and we the rich, we will definitely remove by cutting off all means of survival. That's how I started this off by talking about the middle class. The middle class is the force of power when it comes to sovereignty and freedom because they are the class that gets to make choices. They have choices. They can make choices and they can say no. They can remove their consent. This way we shall make nation states the new parents of the individuals through this reliable climate where our international agents will have done what's necessary to push aside any specter of world war. We shall encourage the excessive centralization for the state. In this way, the individuals can acquire the impression of total freedom to explore while the legendary burden of personal liabilities will be transferred to the state. It's taking your humanity away from you, right? Making you a child of the state, even if you're a full fucking fledged adult. Thus, it will be possible to sharply increase the burden of the state by multiplying without any limit body of intellectual public servants, insured for years in advance of material security. They will be consequently perfect for executors of government authority in the words of our power. Well, we saw that in 2020, didn't we? Didn't we? Everybody wants to be a revolutionary. Everybody wants to be the one that will be the underdog and say no. But when the going gets tough, The tough don't get going, they submit. It's the real strong that say no, thus creating an impressive body of officials who in itself will form a government within a government, irrespective of the political party that is in power. This anonymous machine can serve us one day means of leverages when the moment comes to accelerate the economic collapse of the nation states, because these will not be able indefinitely to sustain such mass salaries without having going into debt beyond their means. Makes me think of like the European Union too. Like at one point when I was a little girl, every European country was its own sovereign nation. It's not anymore, is it? On the other hand, the same machine will give us an image of cold and uncaring of the government apparatus, and how this complex machine is useless in many forms of its functions will serve as a cover and protect against the populations. For who would dare to venture through the mazes of such a labyrinth in order to assert his personal grievances? They're talking about red tape, making it so complicated to get things done through governmental bureaucracy that people just don't do it anymore. They just give up and surrender. God, these people are brilliant, but they're diabolical. Always during this periods of general intoxication, we shall also take advantage of it to buy or eliminate, according to the necessities of the moment, all the company dictators, the person in charge of the major bodies of state, centers of scientific research, among which the action and efficiency would risk to give too much to owe to the nation states. The state should not absolutely become an independent strength in itself, which would risk to escape us and to put into danger all our ancestral plans. We shall also watch to have an absolute control on all the supernatural structures of nations. These international bodies must be placed under our absolute jurisdiction. In the same sense, and to guarantee the profitability of our influence with populations, we shall have to control all the news media. Our banks will thus see to finance only those who are favorable to us, whereas they will oversee the closure of the more reluctant. It should go almost unnoticed in principle in the population, whom they will be absorbed by their needs to make more money and to entertain themselves. We shall have to take care with finalizing from now on the phase of deregionalization of the rural regions begun at the beginning of the economic crisis of 1929. Overcrowding the cities with our bedfellows of the Industrial Revolution, the rural owners, by their economic independence, their capacity to produce the basis of the food supply to the states, is a threat to us, to our future plans. Piled up in cities, they will be more dependent on our industries to survive. We cannot allow ourselves the existence of groups independent from our power. Thus, let us eliminate the landowners by making them obedient slaves of the industries being under our control. As for others, let us allow them to get organized in agricultural cooperatives, and that our agents will infiltrate to direct them better according to our future priorities. Through the state, let us attempt to highlight well the compulsory respect for the diversity of cultures, of the peoples, of the religions, of the ethnic groups, which are all ways for us to convey the personal freedom before the notion of national unity, which allow us to divide better the population of the state, nation state, and so to weaken them in their authority and in their capacity to maneuver. Pushed to these extreme limits, but on the international plan, this concept in the future will urge the economic or the ethnic groups of various nations to group together and to claim individually each their own part of power that will finish ruining nations and will make them burst into endless wars. Open borders, that's what they're talking about. When nation states will be so weakened by so much infighting, quiet established on the when nation states will be so weakened by so much infighting, quiet established, I think they meant to be, I don't think they meant that word, but on the recognition of the rights of the minorities and their independence. The nationalists, divide into various cultural and religious fractions, will oppose blindly in the fight without outcome, and the youth will have totally lost contact with its roots. Then we can use the United Nations to begin to impose our new world order. Moreover, at this point, the humanitarian, social, and historical ideas of the nation states will have long since burst under the pressure of the international division. End of the document. Date June 1967. Here's a side note. 18 years later, another important meeting was held in Canada. This particular group met again in Toronto at the end of June of 1985, but this time to finalize the last steps leading to the collapse of nation states and to seize the international power by the United Nations. And before we get into the next section, Red Dawn, let's take a brief word from one of our sponsors, which is me at Fusion Body Studio.
We have 2 brand new videos up on Fusion Body Studio. These are both 60-minute exercise videos. And both of these videos came as a request from our students. The first one is a hip flush. This hip flush video deals with actively releasing hip tightness. Hip tightness refers to stiffness or restricted range of motion around the hip joint, often felt in the front, the hip flexors, the outer hips, the glutes, or the back of the hips, the hamstrings. It's one of the most common mobility issues, especially for people who sit a lot or for people who run a lot. The hip is a ball and socket joint designed for multi-direction movement. Tightness happens when surrounding muscles or connective tissue becomes shortened, overactive, or imbalanced. So if you have a feeling of stiffness or pulling in the front of the hip, a reduced range of motion, like troubled squatting or extending the hip, discomfort during sitting, standing up, or climbing stairs, experience extreme low back pain, or an anterior pelvic tilt, or have a clicking or pinching sensation in the hip joint, then this video is perfect for you. This is an all levels video. We use active mobility, so we get you nice and hot and sweaty because rigid things break. So we want to get the body nice and hot so we can actually move within the hip to start to release some of the problems. For this video, you need no equipment but a chair, and every single person has a chair in his or her house. Our second new 60-minute video that came as a request from our students is dealing with the posterior chain. Now, in every single video that we have, the posterior chain is being activated, but we decided to dedicate one bar fusion class specifically to this chain of muscles to help our students understand the importance of the posterior chain. The posterior chain refers to the group of muscles along the backside of your body, from your heels up to the base of your skull. These muscles are responsible for extension, stabilization, and power generation in most athletic and functional movements. The posterior chain matters because of 1, posture and alignment. It counterbalances the front or anterior chain muscles like the chest, quads, and abs. A weak posterior chain can often lead to rounded shoulders, forward head posture, and low back pain. 2, it's athletic power. Most athletic movements, sprinting, jumping, throwing, climbing, or lifting, heavily rely on hip extension, which is generated through the posterior chain of the glutes and the hamstrings. Having a healthy posterior chain is also injury prevention. It strengthens the muscles that help protect the knee, the hips, and the spine by improving muscle mechanics and load distribution. It's also, finally, functional movement. Everyday actions like standing up, walking, or lifting depends on coordinated activation of the posterior chain. So this is really important as we age too, to be able to get up and down. Having a healthy posterior chain helps you move better, stand taller, prevent injury, and generate more strength and speed. Again, both of these new videos are 60 minutes. They are all levels. If you would like to join us over on Fusion Body Studio, we do take requests from our students because our job over on Fusion Body Studio is to serve our students in our best capacity with the education that we have been granted. For me, I've spent 19 years studying the human body from a physical and a very spiritual perspective. So basically, Fusion Body Studio is your at-home fitness boutique. You don't have to go to a studio. You can do all of this in the comfort of your own home with nobody watching. We have have a plethora of videos on our library, including branching out and having even more teachers come on board, master teachers from all over different walks of life, different parts of the world, and understanding the body from different perspectives. So we try to keep our prices really, really low. For tier 1, which is just the exercise videos, it is $25 a month, which is literally the price of a yoga studio drop-in for one class. If you want to take our workshops, which include things like the alchemy of movement, health, healing, and beyond, which looks at holistic healing principles, then you can pay $40 a month, just an extra $15 a month to get not only all of the exercise classes, but also all of our workshops. Within each membership, you also get one live exercise class a month, plus a call-in where we get to sit and discuss different topics. And on top of that, if you enter BRICE20, BRICE 20, all caps, at checkout, you can get an additional 20% off your tuition for the first 6 months that you are with us. On top of that, you also get the first 7 days for free to try out Fusion Body Studio to see if it works for you. After 7 days, if you decide that this is not the studio for you, then that's perfectly fine. You can cancel before your card is charged. So with that being said, we hope to see you all over on Fusion Body Studio.
All right, you guys, here we go. We're going to get started into part 2. So part 1, Bread and Circus, was their meeting, their secret meeting from 1967. So now we're bopping forward to 1985, round 2, called Red Dawn. From their meeting in 1985, allegedly for entertainment and educational purposes only. The last 18 years were very profitable for the progress of our world projects. I say to you, brothers, that we touch now almost the goal. The fall of the nation states is not more than a question of time, relatively short, I have to admit to you confidentially. Due to our infiltration agents and our colossal financial resources, unprecedented progress has now been made in all areas of science and technology, of which we control the largest corporations financially. Since secret meetings with M.D. Rothschild within the 56 years, which we were aimed at finalizing the development and implementation, there we go, of world computers, it is now possible to foresee the establishment of a kind of an international highway where all these machines are interconnected. The internet. Remember, this is 1985. Because, as you already know, the direct control of individual populations of the planet, at the very least, should be totally impossible without the use of computers, electronics, and attaching them to each other in the vast global network. These machines also have the advantage of replacing millions of people, AI. In addition, they have neither conscious nor any moral, which is essential for the success of a project like ours. Above all, these machines do, without question, everything that is dictated to them. They are perfect slaves, which our predecessors have dreamed, but not that they were able to doubt that one day it would be possible to perform such a miracle. These machines, without a country, without a color, without a religion, without political affiliation, are the ultimate fulfillment of our tool for the New World Order. They are the cornerstone. The organization of these machines in the vast world network, the superior levels of which we shall control, will serve us to immobilize the population. But how? Could you imagine hearing about this in 1985? I mean, this is groundbreaking. And reading it now, I'm adding in commentary. Like, I'm saying the internet. They're not saying the internet. I just said AI. They haven't said AI. This would have been groundbreaking in 1985, but reading this second part now especially gives me shivers because this is what we're dealing with right now. The fact that computers are taking over our jobs, AI is taking over everything. Crazy, and they're right. These computers, these AI, they have no they're not sentient beings. They have no loyalty, no conscience, no morals. Okay, so how? Let's reread that again. The organization of these machines in the vast world network, internet, The superior levels of which we shall control will serve us to immobilize the populations, but how? As you know, the basic structure of our new world order consists in its essence of a multitude of diverse networks, each converging all the spheres of human activity on the whole of the planet. Until these days, all these networks were interconnected by a common ideological base, that of the man as being the center and the ultimate fulfillment of the universe. So thanks to all these networks, united by the link of the new religion of man for man, my truth, right, that we covered the first batch, how man is now, there's a new religion now, the selfishness, my truth, my identity, me, over what is better for the mass majority. So we have this new religion of selfishness, of entitlement, of narcissism. So they're saying, so thanks to all these networks united by the link of the new religion of man for man, we were easily able to infiltrate all human sectors in all the Western countries to modify the moral base. The result is that today, this man, that it is a part of politics, of economic, the social, the education, of the scientific, or the religious, already has, since our last reunion at the end of June 1967, abandoned his past inheritance and replacing it by our ideal of a world religion based only on man. Cut off than he is from now on his own historical roots, this man does not wait anymore in the end as he is proposed a new ideology. This, properly understood, is ours, that of the global village community, which will be the center. I mean, it's quite genius, isn't it? They've taken away our pride in our own nations, our pride in our individuality. They've done stuff like destroyed our historical roots. I mean, even as an American, they want to make America at fault for everything and that we should be upset that our ancestors settled here. Even though, even though historically every single land on the planet has been conquered at some point. But we're the bad guys. We can't be proud of being Americans. We can't be proud of our heritage. Instead, we must be ashamed, and then we must converse into the selfishness where we're not acknowledging our historical roots. And instead, we're converging on the international highway, which we're doing right now on YouTube in this video. However, as they said, this computer is not a sentient being. Therefore, even though they're using it for evil, we can also use it for good. And that is precisely what we will give him, encouraging him to take part, body and soul, in the global electronic network where the borders of nation states have been forever abolished, wiped out at their deepest roots, even with things like these, right? While this misled man will be absorbed by his blind enthusiasm to be part of this new world community, by being a part of this vast network of computers for our count, we shall see from the superior levels which will be hidden from him to file, to identify, to record, and to make profitable according to our own objectives, algorithms, right? The fact that I can talk about wanting to buy a new mattress. The next thing I know, I have all these ads for mattresses on my phone. They are puppeting it. They're making us profitable. Because inside this new global society, no individual has a potential for profitability for us and cannot escape us. The constant contribution to the electronic technology will have to assure us all the means to file, identify, and control all individuals of the population of the West. For those who do not represent exploitable profitability by ourselves, we will ensure they are eliminated through all local civil wars that we have taken care to break out here and there through the work of our servants and the fall of the economy of the nation states and the opposition and claims of various groups within those states. They're so cocky in 1985, and granted, a lot of this stuff has happened. Like, granted, they have gotten away with a lot of stuff. I don't think they ever really counted on such a vast majority of people to say, no. Like, such a vast majority of people to push back in 2020. I think they thought it was just going to be a couple people here and there that they could eliminate. So that's kind of funny. Here is thus the detailed manner by which we shall proceed before 1998 to pave the road to the birth of our world government. Let's see, guys. I'm interested to see this. I can't. Let me know. Be careful with the words you use in the comment section, but let me know what jumps out to you. One, to multiply tenfold the society of leisure activities which have been so profitable to date by serving to us as the invention of video, the VCR, that we financed in games which are connected with it, end up corrupting the morality of the youth, video games. Let us offer him the possibility of satisfying now all his instincts, of being possessed by his senses, and a slave of these. We know it has neither ideal nor internal strength to defend whatever it is. As they said earlier, control your senses, y'all. That's the best way to defeat this people. They want us to put us in a state where we think our emotions are so real and we're so right and our truth is the truth and you can't tell me this and you can't call me fat and you can't say these things because it hurts my feelings and my truth is truth. Me, 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 me. They want us to be so caught in our emotions that we don't have, they say it right here. They're right here. That we don't have the internal strength to defend whatever it is. You gotta toughen up, Buttercup. If you want to defeat this wicked group of villains, you gotta toughen up. Cowgirl up. There's no crying in baseball. Whatever emotions you're feeling, you need to bite your fucking tongue and be strong. Because it's right here. That is what defeats them. Don't give in to entitlement. Don't get into this idea of comfort and laziness and leisure. Don't be afraid to work, to sweat, and to be strong. That's what's going to defeat them. It's right here. He is an individual by nature and represents a perfect candidate whom we can model easily according to our desires and our priorities. See, when you're unhinged, when you're too emotional and you're unhinged, they control you. Moreover, remember yourselves with which ease our predecessors were able to direct all the German youth at the beginning of the century by means of disenchanting the latter. 2. So that was the first one. They're going to invent all these video games. They're going to make pastimes and leisure activities like playing video games and fucking off. They're going to make that the priority because it's going to entice your senses. They're going to make you so weak. And so you are going to be so unable to actually handle hard work that it's going to be easy for them to just come in and plow you down. And you're going to be so confused about who you are because you're stuck in my truth versus the truth. You're not able to self-reflect. You're not able to actually grow as a person. Instead, you're entitled to always being right instead of realizing sometimes you're wrong. You're not going to be strong enough to fight back. So that was number 1. Now let's get to number 2. Encouraging the student contesting for all the causes connected to ecology. The compulsory protection of the latter will be the main advantage when we shall have urged United Nation states to exchange their internal debt for the loss of 33% of all their territories been left to the wild state. I don't think that needs more explanation because I don't want to go too deeper into that because of words and because of this platform. 3, filling in the interior vacuum of this youth by intimidating him from a very young, sound age to the universe, or sorry, I think they meant to say initiating him. Again, this person has translated this from French, so I am so grateful, but sometimes these sentences don't make a whole lot of sense in English. That's cool. I think I can figure out though, so let's read that again. So number 3, filling in the interior vacuum of this youth by initiating him from a very young, sound age to the universe of computers, using that for educational system, a slave in the service of another slave that we control. Start going back to libraries. Teach your children to read cursive. Teach them how to use a Dewey Decimal System, a bibliography. 4, on another plane, establishing international free trade as being a priority absolved for the economic survival of nation states. This new economic conception will help us to accelerate the decline of nationalists of all the nations, to isolate them into diverse factions and at the deliberate moment to set them wildly some to others in civil war, which will finish running these nations. 5. To assure us at all costs of the success of such an enterprise, making sure that our agents already infiltrated in the ministries of intergovernmental affairs and immigration of nation states make in-depth modifications to the laws of these ministries. These modifications will essentially aim at opening the doors of the Western countries to a more and more massive immigration inside their borders. Immigration which we shall moreover have provoked by having taken care of touching off here and there new local conflicts. By well-orchestrated press campaigns and public opinion of nation states targeted, we shall provoke among them a significant refugees influx. You can't make this shit up. Which will have the effect to destabilize their internal economy and to make increase the racial tensions inside their territory. We shall see to make so groups of foreign extremists make these part of the immigrants' influxes that will facilitate destabilization. That is why they're having people in my country fight back against ICE. ICE, ICE, baby. When in reality, under the Trump administration, they have not deported any more than any other presidential administration. But the fact that people are fighting back is because these people told them to. They fucked with their emotions. They made them destabilize. So go back to number one, they got people to destabilize their emotions through video games, through this idea of this new religion of I, me, I'm important. My truth is the only truth. Listen to me. I'm a perpetual victim. And now they're poking that bear to make people fight against border control. The main part a president plays in the United States of America, I know I have people from all over the world, but the United States, the president's main role is to protect our borders. That is the president's main job in the United States, is to protect our borders. So destabilizing that, making people vulnerable in their own communities, taking away the American culture, taking away the American flag. I mean, in my country alone, in America, they've made this a symbol of racism. Are you kidding me? This is a symbol of freedom, not racism. Okay. 6, this free trade, which in reality is not because it is already controlled by us all at the top of the economic hierarchy, infiltrating it by the trilateral commission that of Asia, America, and Europe. It will bring us the discord inside nation states by the increase of the unemployment connection with the restructuring of our multinations. 7, shifting slowly but certainly our multinations acquired in the new countries to the area of the market economy, such as the Eastern European countries, in Russia and in China, for example. We do not care much at the moment if their population represents or not a vast pool of new customers. This is giving me chill bumps. Made in China, y'all. What interests us is to have access, first of all, to a workforce slave, cheap and non-union, which these countries and those of the third world are offering us. Moreover, are not their governments set up by us? Do they not rely on foreign aid and in the loans from our International Monetary Fund and our world banks? These transfers offer several advantages for us. They contribute to maintain these new populations in the illusion of economic liberation in political freedom, while in reality, we shall dominate them by the appetite of the earnings and the debt which they can never settle. As for the Western populations, they shall be maintained in the dream of economic well-being, because the products imported from these countries do not suffer any price increase. By contrast, without them being aware at first, more and more industries will be obliged to close their doors because of the transfers that we will have conducted outside of the Western countries. These closures will increase unemployment and will bring major losses in revenue for the nation states. Tariffs. That is why the Trump administration wants to bring tariffs. Number 7, tariffs ends number 7. When we impose tariffs on imports and making the prices more expensive because they're saying, hey, listen, we already control China. We already control India. So we can get people who are basically slaves, so, work trafficking made in China, we could have it shipped, manufactured, sent over to America, sell it for cheap in America. So it's putting American-made companies out of business. And I'm using America because that's my country. Wherever you're from, put it, in your own country's terms. But when the Trump administration came in and said, okay, we're going to put tariffs, that does what? Ends number 7. Because now we are booming our economy in the United States because people are able to go back to work because we're buying American made. Because to pay for something that's imported from China means it's going to be more expensive. But if you buy it American made, not only is it going to be cheaper, but it's going to ensure that Americans are back to work and independent, that they are not relying on another country. So that is why the Trump administration put in tariffs, was so that number 7 on this list could not happen. So tariffs are a good thing. 8, so we shall set up a global economy at the world level, which will escape totally the control of nation states. This new economy will be over everything. No political or labor union pressures can have power over it. It will dictate our own global policies and will force a political reorganization, but according to our priorities at the world level. 9, this independent economy, having our laws as our laws, we establish a world mass culture. By international control of the television, media, and I'm going to add in YouTube, Rumble, Telegram, Instagram, TikTok, we shall establish a new culture, but leveled, uniform for all, without any future creation avoiding us. The future artists will be in our images or will not survive. Finish, therefore, the times when independent cultural creations put any time in danger our globalist projects, like that was so often the case in the past. So no more independent thought. And that's what art is, right? That's what they're saying. Artists will now oblige by what we tell them to create. Paintings, music, movies, skits that are usually come from the invention and the spark of life inside of human, that spark of creation inside of a human. We are creators. We create ourselves. That's why art has declined so much. Like, look at paintings of the past. Look at music of the past. We can't replicate that anymore because we're not allowed to. When you allow people freedom to create, that spark of life inside of them creates on its own sovereignty, which threatens people who want to enslave. We will find it impossible to make use of the military forces of the nation states, such as those of the United States, and humanitarian goals. In realities, these forces will be used to submit our control to reluctant countries. Thus, the third world countries and other like them will not be able to escape our desire to use their people as slave labor. Disgusting. But, I mean, it's obvious that's what's happening. 11, to control the world market, we shall have to divert the productivity of its first goal, free the man from the hardness of the work. We shall direct it to turn it against the man by enslaving the latter in our economic system, where he will have only the choice to become our slave and even a future criminal. Don't even think about opening your own business, your own small business. Why do you think in 2020 that's what they went after? Why was it that the mom and pop shop down the street, the local, grocery store on the corner had to close down, but the big grocery store down the street could stay open? They're getting rid of small business. Small business is middle class. 12, all these transfers abroad of our multinations in the world recognition of the economy will, among others, aim at making climb the unemployment in Western countries. This situation will be all the more practical because at first we shall have favored the mass import of basic products inside the nation state, and at the same moment we shall have overloaded these states by the exaggerated employment of their population in the product of services which they cannot pay anymore. These extreme conditions will multiply by millions the masses of welfare recipients of all kinds, of illiterates, of homeless persons. So they're going to encourage you to live beyond your means to the point where you can't pay for anything. You can only get work for them. And they're going to get you because now you're broke. You file bankruptcy, you're on welfare because if you allow the government to take care of you, you allow the government to control you. 13. By the loss of millions of jobs in the primary sector from the covert evasion of foreign capital at the nation states, thus we will find it possible to set in danger the death, the social harmony, and the specter of civil war. 14. These international manipulations of the governments and the populations of the nation states will supply us the pretext to use IMF to urge the Western governments to set up budgets of austerity under the lid of the imaginary reduction of their national debt, of the hypothetical preservation of their international credit rating, of the impossible conversion of the social peak. Credit scores are bullshit. They mean nothing, but they determine everything here in the United States. 15. By these emergency budgetary measures, we shall so break the financing of the nation states for all their mega projects, which represent a direct threat to our world control of the economy. 16. Moreover, all these austerity measures will allow us to break the national wills of modern structures in the domains of the energy, the art, agriculture, and transport and new technologies. 17. These same measures will offer us the ideal opportunity to establish our ideology of economic competition. This will be translated with the nation state by the voluntary reduction of salaries, voluntary departure with presentation of medals for service rendered, which will open to us doors to the establishment everywhere of our technology of control. In this perspective, all these departures will be replaced by computers in our service. 18. These social transformations will help us to change in the depth of the police and military workforce of the nation states. Under the pretext of these necessities of the moment and without arousal of suspicions, we shall get rid once and for all of the individuals having a consciousness. This restructuring of the police and military bodies will allow us to dismiss without contest the old staff, as well as all the elements not conveying our internationalist principles. These will be replaced by young recruits devoted to consciousness and morality and already quite entrained and favorable to the mindless use of our technology and electronic networks. So fake morality. 19. In the same time, and always under the pretext of budget cuts, we shall ensure the transfer of military bases of the nation states towards the United Nations organization. 20. It's all fun, isn't it? This is what's happening right now in our society. In this perspective, we shall work on the reorganization of the international mandate of the United Nations. From peacekeeping force without decision-making power, we shall bring it to become a rapid deployment force where will be merged in the unified whole the armed portion of the nation states. This will allow us to carry out without fighting the demilitarization of these states in a way that none of them in the future are not sufficiently powerful, independent to question our world power. How dare you question the authority? How dare you? You know, that's what being a heretic means, right? I'm a proud heretic. I'm a proud heretic. The definition of heretic is one who questions the narrative. One who questions the narrative. I'm a proud heretic. I hope you are too. 21. To accelerate this process of transfer, we shall imply the current force of the United Nations in conflicts impossible to sort out. In this way, and by means of the media, which we control, we shall show to the populations the impotence and the uselessness of this force in its current state. The helping frustrations and push to its climax at the appropriate moment will push the population of the nation states to beg the international authorities to form such a multinational force as soon as possible to protect at all costs the peace. 22. The next appearance of this global willpower of the multinational military force will keep pace with the establishment inside the nation states, a multi-jurisdictional task force. This combination of the police and military staff created straight from the pretext of the increase of the growing political and social instability inside these states collapsing under the burden of the economic problem will allow us to control better the Western populations. Here, the excessive use of the identification and the electronic recording information on the individuals will supply us a complete surveillance of all the intended population. Say goodbye to your privacy, you fucking weirdos. Like, that's all this establishment is. They're fucking weirdos. Like, why are you gonna be spying on people? That's fucking weird. 23. This interior and exterior police and military reorganization of the nation states will allow the convergence towards the obligation of the implementation of the judicial work system. This center will allow the various police bodies of nation states to have quick access to data banks on all the potentially dangerous individuals for us on the planet. I'm sure I'm on that data bank. You guys probably are too if you're watching this. We're on a list somewhere. We're on a list somewhere. The image of a better judicial efficiency and more narrow links created and maintained with the military will help us to emphasize the necessity of an international court doubled by a world judicial system, the one for civil affairs and criminal individuals and the other for the nations. 24. During the growth accepted by all these new necessities, it will be imperative for us to complete as soon as possible the world control of inside the territories of nation states. To do it, we shall accelerate the Alpha Plan implemented during the 60s by some of our predecessors. This plan, originally aimed at two objectives, which remains the same even today, by the intervention of crazy pew-pewers, create a climate of insecurity in the populations to bring a tighter control of pew-pews. Direct acts of violence so as to make it appear the responsibility of religious extremists or persons affiliated to religious allegiances of traditional tendency, or still persons claiming to have privileged communications with God. Today, to accelerate the control of pew-pews, we can use the fall of economic conditions of the nation states, which will entail with it a complete social destabilization, thus an increase of violence. I do not need to remind you, nor to demonstrate to you, brothers, the foundations of this control of pew-pews. Without this, it would become almost impossible for us to put our knees on the population of the targeted states. Remember yourselves, with this success of our predecessors were able to control Germany of 1930 with new laws applied in the time. Laws, moreover, on which are based the current laws of nation states for the same control. Americans, do not give up your pew-pews. We are the last man standing. Let me know in the comment section for my Canadians, my Australians, my Brits, my French people, Europeans, when did you guys hand over your pew-pews? Because this was written in 1998. So when was it that they actually took your pew-pews from you? They are trying it. They've been trying it here in the United States. It just so happens here in the United States, we have this problem. We have a little problem. It's called the Constitution. And our forefathers were like, you know what? First code of conduct here in this new fledgling country is that we're going to let people like say whatever they want. We're going to let people just say whatever they want. They can criticize the government if they want to. They can talk about whatever they want to. We're also going to let them believe whatever they want, whatever religion they want. They can believe it. We're also going to let the press say whatever they want. And because of that, y'all better get a pew-pew. We all better get a pew-pew. And we're also going to put in here that if the government tries to take too much from you, if it becomes tyrannical, guess what, people of the United States? It is your responsibility to and take them out. So they have not been able to take it from the United States. They have tried desperately, but the thing about the United States is we're still a young country. We're kind of teenagers, so the more they try to take it from us, the more we double down. And I'm telling you, my Americans, if Sky Daddy, if hologram Jesus comes down to a sky near you as prophesized by Sergei Monast, and tells you to give up your pew-pews, you definitely know that that's not real Jesus. Because real Jesus would want you to protect yourself. Real Jesus was anti-enslavement. All right. And you know what guarantees anti-enslavement? One of these. 25. The last stages relate to omega phase experience from the experiments made at the beginning of the 70s. They contain the application at the world level, electronic magnetic weapons, the change of climates. I'm not gonna read any more of that, guys, because you know what they're talking about. I don't need to read any more of that. I'm kind of nervous to read any more of that because of the platform we're on. Y'all know what they're talking about. 26 is the same thing, the electromagnetic cause of earthquakes. Okay, same thing as 25, the weather witches. 27, who can suspect us? We do. We suspect you. They must be really upset that so many people are onto them. Who can suspect used means? Those who will dare to raise themselves up against us by broadcasting of this information as for existence in the context of our plot will become suspicious in the eyes of the authorities of their nations and their population. Thanks to the disinformation, to lie, to the hypocrisy, and to the individualisms which we created within the people of the nation states, the man became an enemy for the man. So these independent individuals who are the most dangerous for us exactly because of their freedom will be considered by their fellow man as being enemies and not liberators. The slavery of the children, the plunder of the wealth of the third world, the unemployment, the propaganda of the liberation of the DRUG, the exhaustion of the youth of the nations, the ideology of the respect for personal freedom broadcasted within these morals and inside the nation states, obscurantism considered as a basic for pride, the inter-ethnic conflicts, and our last realization that all this allows us to finally see the ancestry fulfillment of our dream and that of the institution of our new world ornament. End of document, dated June of 1985. They must be so pissed because there's a lot of us that are like, y'all are fucking weirdos. Like, this is not gonna fly. Anyway, conclusion. So the Toronto Protocols is a myth or reality. It would be like asking if Brave New World is also a myth or reality, even though it's a novel. Yet its author too had access to documents of the time to create it. The author knew well that the revelation and the dissemination of the information he possessed, but in a form other than the novel, would have aroused more suspicion than acceptance among the population. And how many other authors also had to use the same strategy to warn their contemporaries and future generations. So, the Toronto Protocols, myth or reality? The urgency of the current situation, that endangered by the onset of budgetary restrictions marking the beginning of the end, the near realization of the occult New World Order, did not allow for the writing of this novel, which would have taken too much time in the present context. But the impact provoked by the revelations of these documents is nevertheless significant, for their publication will have the effect of placing those who originated them on the defensive. What is desired here is that beyond the disinformation conveyed and maintained by the unscrupulous politician and the people frightened at the possibility of losing their personal interest, each reader can reflect, group together with others like him or her, and now take measures to survive in the face of what is coming. Even if my life is in danger because of this dissemination of information like this, yours is even more so from ignorance of this same information. So, the Toronto Protocols, myth or reality? It's up to you to answer. It's up to you to see in recent and future events whether these documents belong to the realm of fiction or reality. It's up to you to realize that fear has no other purpose than to paralyze you. and place you at the mercy of those who only want to control you in order to better enslave you according to their interest, which in the end are not yours. Signed, Sergei Monast, investigative journalist, March 1995. All right, you guys. What do you think about that? Be careful with your comments down in the comment section below. I would totally suggest ordering this book if you can, so you have it for yourself. And I guess the only thing going forward is just make sure that you are always in a place of sovereign control. The biggest thing we learned from both documentations that we went through is that the only thing they cannot take from you is your sovereignty and your choice. Learn to control your emotions, have discernment, observe what's going on. Don't react in vigilante violence. That's what they want you to do. And just say no. The one thing that can stop them from this diabolical plan is you simply saying no. All right, you guys. Until next time, I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day. Keep saying no, keep doing you, and do not give these up. And we'll see you very, very soon. Bye, everybody.